Hold up.
How deep can we go?
In New York and America, and I'm sure here in Shanghai and China, there are a lot of questions asked about the U.S. election. What does it mean? What is going to happen? Is the United States somehow a different country than we were 2 weeks ago? And let me say to you the same thing I say to my friends in New York. Relax. Take a deep breath. Calm down. Everything's going to be fine. The United States is still the United States. We still have our rule of law. We still have a thriving democracy. And most importantly, we still have respect for each other, which is why America has thrived for over 220 years and will thrive for at least another 220 years. The second point I want to make is about the United States and China specifically. As I'm sure most of you are aware, Donald Trump was very much anti-trade, anti the TPP, anti-NAFTA, and anti-China's ability to manufacture and ship things to the United States, undercutting American companies that used to do that. While there will be difficult trade negotiations and foreign policy negotiations, the closeness that has developed between the American and Chinese people over the course of the last decades is not going to stop. These are the world's two greatest, most important countries. These are two countries with enormous mutual respect for each other and their peoples. And China and the U.S. are two countries with a common future, a common destiny. It is essential that we work and grow closer and not further apart in our country's interests and in the world's interest as we look to the future.
President-elect Trump has been very outspoken about some types of immigration, but primarily he's talking about illegal immigration. And we're here, you're all here, I assume, because of your interest in the EB-5 program, which is legal immigration. And I would postulate that President-elect Trump is going to be a strong supporter of the EB-5 program. It is a program that is extremely helpful to creating employment in the United States. And I would like to mention a few things about the program and how it can be helpful to many people who want to be legal immigrants in the United States. First, I think it's important because of the security that you would expect when you want to make an investment in the EB-5 program to qualify, I think you would want to pick an area where there are very, let's say, experienced and strong business people who do the building of the new projects. And you would want a EB-5 fund that has the experience, has the organization, and knows how to select the right projects and the right developers of those projects. That's key. It's very important. It's very fundamental. Whenever you make an investment or put money up, you want to be sure that you're protected and you have the right people who will be handling your money. I have been coming to China for the last more than 3 years, maybe 4, talking about this program and watching projects that have been proposed and now have been built. And they are wonderful projects. And the people who got into the EB-5 program here from China and elsewhere are very satisfied. I have known President-elect Trump for about 30 years. He's a very accomplished businessman. And now what he's talking about is infrastructure development, which is needed. And I know, and you all probably know, because whenever there's some development going on, you have to have the commensurate type of infrastructure development that's required to not only help that project, but encourage more projects in the same location. I encourage you to ask all the questions you might have about the program and express your concerns. And I know that specifically this particular fund that I am part of, they're ready to answer any questions you might have. Ask as many as you want. Feel secure, but know that it's a good program because it is the type of immigration that's welcome to the United States of America And I wish all of you good luck and good health and sunshine tomorrow.
Everyone has been talking about the U.S. election. That's all that's on everyone's minds, back home as well as here. Just a really quick, again, something you touched upon in your speech, but what sort of impact will the election and the surprise result have on Chinese immigration in the U.S., do you think?
Well, I think that is a very important question because there's a lot of misunderstanding on that. Donald Trump won for a lot of reasons. One was his very strong stance against illegal immigration. And often in the media and among the public, the distinction between legal and illegal immigration gets lost. And so people will say, oh, Trump is anti-immigrant. He never said that. What he said is he is anti-illegal immigrant. And when he talks about things like building a wall with Mexico, it's not to end legal immigration, it's to prevent illegal immigration. So when, in the context of EB-5, you know, people might be thinking, oh, Trump is anti-immigration, this is going to be the end of EB-5, or it's going to be difficult or changed. No, that's not the case. EB-5 is a long-standing legal program to allow people to get green cards, but also to bring capital, investment capital to the United States. And Trump understands the need for capital. He understands the need for investment. And as I said, EB-5 is a legal immigration situation. So all that rhetoric that you hear, all the fears that are raised, if you want to come to the U.S. illegally, that's a legitimate concern. But if you're interested in the EB-5 program, yes, Congress may make some changes here, or they may change it some way or the other, but I don't think it's going to go away, and I think it will continue to provide both capital and jobs in the U.S., an opportunity for investment, and to get a green card here in China.
Nick, just a really quick overview of the EB-5 program. What can it offer to Chinese nationals? What's your elevator pitch for the EB-5 program?
Well, you know, as many of you know, EB-5 is mainly used by families throughout China, mainly for their children immigrating, you know, into the education system or into the U.S. And you know, it's a fantastic vehicle for Chinese nationals, you know, to immigrate to the U.S. You know, any family, you know, husband, wife, and multiple children that are under 21 are all eligible on a 526 petition for a single. So one investment of $500,000 will qualify an entire family as long as the children are under 21. So, you know, it's that way now. It's not going to stay that way. The new legislation that's been pending for many years that will be enacted in 2017 will bring that amount up to at least $800,000 per family.
And Ambassador Gargano, any thoughts on what's, you know, in store for the EB-5 legislation when it comes up for renewal? Any other modifications that you expect to see?
Well, I think that with the new president, I think he will be a strong advocate to continue the program. There's always some kind of issues that come up every year that Nick knows better than I about the EB-5 program, but somehow it's always approved again. And I think now with President-elect Trump, who was a developer himself, a big businessman, I think that will magnify the need for a program like this. And so I'm confident that it will continue.
Scott, as a developer, you know, or a developer representative on this panel, what are some of the, why did you choose to go the EB-5 route to begin with? I know you've raised a few $100 million through the program with Nick and others, but how did you start?
So we started, you know, back in 2010, we started learning about the program and getting educated about it because obviously the financing markets, the conventional financing markets were difficult. You know, it's a great program because it accomplishes two things. For the developer, from a developer standpoint, you're able to raise the money in relatively quick order and at a favorable market rate, interest rate. And at the same time, the investors, these EB-5 investors from China or wherever around the world, are getting something. They're getting their citizenship and creating jobs. So that's why the program is a very favorable program in the United States, because not only, and it's a self-funded program, so it doesn't use government money to fund it. So it checks all the boxes. It's good for the investor who's getting their citizenship, and it's good for the developer who's creating jobs. and at the same time able to build projects that are economically feasible, but maybe wouldn't be able to be built in certain times of the market because of banks changing, and you have, in this past cycle, you had Dodd-Frank, which restricted a lot of banks on how much they could lend, or at certain times they shut down. So EB5 was a financial instrument that allowed us to finance projects with, USIF.
And as construction lending gets a little bit tighter in this market, it's making up, senior loans are making up a smaller percentage of the capital stack. Do you see this program even sort of getting more popular with developers?
I think it's going to be as popular. At the end of the day, part of the whole marketing of EB5 is sponsorship and the ability, because these Chinese immigrants or whoever are subscribers to this program, they get their citizenship based on completion of projects. So one of the criteria that Nick uses, and is a big thing for him, is making sure you have good sponsorship, long-standing sponsorship that has liquidity, has a lot of financial means, and has the credibility to go get senior financing and complete the project. Because if you don't complete the project, then these people don't get their citizenship. So it's all about sponsorship, and Nick has lent to the top tier sponsorship in the United States.
Connor, I just wanted to take a step back. We've talked about the developer side, but from the individual investor situation, what are some of the most common questions that come up? And Phoebe, I think this is something that we can talk about as well. What are some of the most common questions that come up when they start? How much confusion is there?
Yeah, I think the most common question what the investors really have is, can they really have the green card, and how and when they will get the money back? I think these are two most important questions.
And what is the average time frame for an investment? So from when you make the investment to finally getting the green card, is there an average time? Has it gone up? Has it gone down?
Yeah, usually it's pretty soon. I think Nick knows that. It's pretty soon, half a year or 1 year or something like that. But now, since there are retrogression issues, the visa backlog issue, so that means Chinese may take 4 years, 5 years, even longer to get the green card.
Phoebe, on that question about the delay or the slower pace of getting your visa, is that creating any problem for these investors? Are they talking about maybe not doing this program because it takes so long?
他想问你一下，就是排期这些对投资人有没有产生非常大的一个影响？
好不容易有一个说中国话的啊，我就开始用中国话回答这个问题。其实呢
So since 2015, even though we have the backlog and the waiting list is getting longer and longer in the whole EB5 program, however, the whole our client has been increasing every single year and all the time. Actually, we just reached our peak in the last very few months. The reason why has something to do with Chinese economy growth, and a lot of Chinese of the currency exchange, and a lot of Chinese people are looking for U.S. assets because the dollars are so strong, and everybody now sees there is a way they can allocate their assets in the United States. It's a totally great way for them to, not put off everything in China. So that's one thing. And right now we have the new Trump as a president. We understand in China we heard some of his immigration policy. Of course, he is very anti-illegal immigrants. However, it's getting tougher and tougher for their skilled workers, like EB3, EB2, those categories as well. And as we know, the majority of the Chinese people, they go to the United States. 95 of our clients is for education. So when they're there, they become F1 students first, and then eventually they have the OPT, as we said, they're gonna, intern for a year. So, and then H1B, and they get their final working, a permanent residence in the United States. However, if those progress is getting more and more difficult, all of those students, which is increasing dramatically every single year, going to the United States, they have to looking for a certain way to settle down. And right now, it turned out EB5 probably is the only way to make it work.
Nick, you talked about the threshold going from 500,000 to 800,000, but I believe you've said before that doesn't seem to be an impediment, right? People are still actively investing and interested even if they have to cough up a few 100,000 more, that doesn't seem to be an issue.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, if you compare the U.S. program to other programs throughout the world, we're the least expensive. I mean, you go to the UK, it's $1.5 million, £3 million. You go to Australia, New Zealand, anywhere else, it's a lot more money. Canada is even over $800,000. So, it shouldn't be an issue. I don't expect it to be an issue, but it is going to change. It will be increased with the new legislation. Probably will take effect in March. What we expect to happen right now is we expect the current law to stay as is and be extended with the CR, which will go through March. That was announced today, actually, in the news. And then between now and March, myself and others are leading the charge to negotiate new legislation that brings forth, good positive change to the program. And one of the changes will be the increased amount. I don't see it as a deterrent for anyone in the program whatsoever.
Okay, let's say people are interested in investing. How do you pick? There's thousands of regional centers out there. There's some with a long track record. There's some with not so much of a track record. What are the things that people should look out for, and what are some red flags when picking a regional center? Because that's essentially, you have to trust that center to make your money work for you. So how does that work?
Well, listen, I think it's pretty simple, right? Track record is everything. Experience is everything. You want to invest with a regional center, like ours that has been doing this for a long time. We started this program in 2010. There was 30 other regional centers in the business. Only a handful are active. Today, you have over 800 regional centers that are in the business, and still only a handful are active. Maybe 40, 50 regional centers are really active. But you have to look at this investment as any other investment. It's location. So you're not going to make an investment, in areas of the country that are not economically viable, right? So we focus on New York, New Jersey, Jersey City, with top-notch developers for a reason. The reason is, it's the success rate, of the projects. You have to deliver to people, projects that are going to meet their immigration goals, and also get their capital returned to them. And that's what we do. So you have to look at location of the project, the developer. You have to make sure they're able to get senior financing, which is very difficult right now. When we first started this program in 2010 and 11, there was no senior financing in the market. There was no construction going on in New York City. EB-5 primed the pump for the senior lenders to get into the development, into the construction lending again. Back then, we're now back in that same place right now again. Lenders have now pulled back, so now you have B lenders in the market. EB-5 capital is even more important right now than it ever has been, in the past. But again, location, track record, transparency of the center is very, very important.
Governor, just on a sort of a macro perspective, in terms of Chinese capital coming in from EB-5, do you see that as a growing force in the U.S. economy?
I do. I think it's an important force. And as Nick was just saying, that you're seeing some of the traditional sources taking a break right now, so that alternative sources like EB-5 funding are critical. And just in my simple way, being from government as opposed to in the industry, if I'm sitting out there and I'm one of you, I'd ask two things. First of all, if I make this investment, will I actually get a green card? And the second is, if I make this investment, will I get my money back? Those are the two questions. And the answer is, to both of those, yes, if. But the if is the important thing. The project has to be completed. It has to work, which is why what Scott was saying earlier about knowing you have a sponsor with a track record, and what Nick was just saying right now is so critical, where you want to put your money in a group that has done this successfully time and time again. Because if you do that, like with the U.S. Immigration Fund, in fact, they make the investment, you will get the green card, and you will get your capital investment back. So I think those are the two key things. You will get the green card, you will get your investment back, but only if you go through someone who actually knows what they're doing and the project is completed.
Yeah, the other thing is critical to look at when you're investing with a regional center is their track record for getting project approved by the USCIS, which is the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service, and USIF has 100% track record on that. All the projects we've done with them, other than the most recent one, which has just been filed, have all been approved, which is an important thing, because without that approval, even if the project's completed, they still don't get their citizenship. So it's critical to be with a regional center that has a track record for getting projects approved and does the right paperwork and files correctly with the government and so forth.
Connor, based on, as they're going through the process, say they've made this investment, what are some of the other concerns that pop up along the way? So they've invested their money, and they've chosen a project, they've chosen a developer. In the course of that, it takes a couple of years for the project to be built and the sales and all that. What other concerns come up for the individual investors, many of which are here? About the regional center, or about the process in general? Yeah.
I think currently for the investor, from the investment side, so since the visa backlog issue, so it will take longer and longer for a whole investment process to get a green card and get the money back. So I think from previously, we may only think about 5 years terms. So we can get the money back and get the green card, permanent green card. And then we may think about another 5 years or something for the redeployment of the money. So it's really important for the investor to understand how will the regional center or the developer use my money for another 5 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important things for investors to think about at current stages.
Ambassador Gargano, everyone here is aware of New York. They understand that lifestyle. They understand, and you can see the governor grinning there because he knows it's right. But what other markets in the U.S. are emerging as hotspots for EB-5 money? What other markets in the U.S. are popular?
Well, obviously the #1 market in my mind would be New York area. And not only Manhattan, which of course was the center of some of the largest projects, the most secure projects, and secure because we have some of the more experienced developers. But now we're seeing an expansion of that development going on outside of Manhattan into the other boroughs. Long Island City is an example. In Brooklyn, around Coney Island and other areas of Brooklyn, it's starting to spread beyond Manhattan. So I still think that's one of the hottest sections of the country, but then you have Florida, you have California, and many other big cities where this could also take place. So I think you have numerous opportunities about where projects are being developed and where you can feel, as you asked before, secure about the projects, secure about the developers who are developing the projects, whether they will survive or go bankrupt, which is very unlikely. So you have that kind of security, and then you have someone like the U.S. Immigration Fund that has a lot of experience, has a great track record. So I think these are the things that you really have to look at, and the areas that are the hottest right now and, on both coastlines, mainly in New York.
Nick, how are the funds structured? Is this an equity investment? Is it mezzanine financing? Can you just give them a quick breakdown of how the funds are structured?
So the majority of our projects are mezzanine loans. So we form entities, and those entities make loans into projects with, with intercreditor agreements with senior lenders. It's recognizable capital. It's treated as, as regular, debt, as opposed to, not being recognized. So, we work really hard to make sure that our loans are treated like any other loan made by any other bank, any other institution, in the U.S. And we've gotten really strong in that space. We do some preferred equity investments, which also have the same protections and the same rights, but you don't get them through an intercreditor agreement. You get them through an operating agreement. But we do, I would say, 85% mezzanine financing. We've done some preferred equity with Witkoff Group on one of our West Hollywood projects.
How do you make that decision when to do a preferred equity thing and when to do a mezzanine?
Really, it's size of the project is really what dictates it. When you get into big projects where the EB-5 loans are, $150 to $300 million, it's really difficult to do that as preferred equity. We prefer to do that as mezzanine financing.
Scott, any headaches? You've talked about the plus. Any downsides to taking the EB-5, or rather, is there things that developers should be aware of when going down that route?
No, we've had a very good working experience on EB-5. We hadn't had issues. Obviously the difference is you commit to an EB-5 lender, and then they have to go out and raise the capital in China, but that's part of the reason to associate yourself with a very strong regional center that has the ability to go out and has the brand in China to raise the capital, has the track record of approvals from the government, successful projects being completed, successful developer. But that's the only timing issue you have, because you commit to them. If I sign a term sheet with Nick, then he has to go out and raise the money in China. But we feel very comfortable with that because the number of deals we've done with USIF and the success and the track record we've had with them, they've had 100% hit ratio, hit record with us, always raised exactly the amount of money that we agreed to raise for the project in a very favorable time frame. So we haven't run into any hiccups on the program. Like I said, all our projects to date have been approved, other than we're currently, USIF is currently raising a project for us in West Hollywood, California, in the Los Angeles suburb, a hotel project, but that's just starting right now. So that hasn't obviously gone through the approval process. We're in the normal course, but all the projects that have raised capital have all been approved by the government already. So we've had a very good working, have had a very good experience with the program. So nothing to complain about or no issues with it.
Nick, Phoebe mentioned, some cases of fraud. It's few and far between. But are there any initiatives coming in place, or is it self-policing mostly? How does this program escape the stigma of being subject to fraud?
Whenever there's money involved, the people, have an opportunity to commit fraud and misrepresent, what they're selling. It happens. But I think what people have to really, have to look at is projects that don't typically need the capital, or the projects that we look to lend money on. If a project can't be developed without the EB-5 capital, it's not a project that you should be looking to invest in, because you've got a desperate situation, and that's what it is. So you have to really look at, we're on our 25th project right now, and with over 6,000 investors, 100% approval rating on all individual petitions and all project petitions. So you've got to look at the project, and you've got to look at the developer, and if it's a new developer with a small project that that really needs the money, I would be skeptical. I wouldn't say it's it's the end of the world, but I'd be skeptical. You're always safer with institutional developers, and when you have institutional banks involved. Like if we do a deal with Scott and they have a loan with Wells Fargo, that's part of our documents. So you have a senior construction mortgage. You've got a developer that can complete it, can borrow the money, has their equity in place, and we just fill in the gap. We fill in the gap capital. That's a safe project.
Governor, there's been a fair bit of political backlash, maybe last year, Senator Feinstein and many others taking a shot at the program. What's that about? There's been a lot of talk about how EB-5 is essentially like a backdoor into citizenship, but there's obviously another side to it as well.
Yeah, I don't understand the reason for the criticism. People could say it's a backdoor way to citizenship, but it's not. It's a law that allows this open door, the front door, for people to come in if they're prepared to make this type of investment in the future of the country. Part of it could be that sometimes the projects don't work, but if you have a group like the U.S. Immigration Fund, you don't have to worry about that. There have been people who have raised funds and put it into projects that did not work. Part of the requirement here is not just that the project be completed, but that it create jobs and permanent jobs. And that's another area where if you don't have the right sponsor and the right project, they may go through and build it, but it doesn't create the jobs that are required under EB-5. So there is always going to be criticism, but I think the need for this is going to become greater because banks have taken a step back, and other provisions like the law Dodd-Frank, the banking law, are kicking in next month that are going to make banks even less inclined to make the appropriate loans. So this type of capital will be needed, and as I think Nick said earlier, he fully expects the law to be reauthorized in March. There will be some modifications, but I think there's an overwhelming sense that this has worked well, despite the occasional criticism.
Scott, the governor mentioned, banks have stepped back. Part of that is there's a concern among some in the market that the market isn't as strong as it was, say, a couple of years ago. What's your take on that? Because that's what they're investing in at the end of the day is the condo market in many cases.
I think, well, it's not, I think it's not only condo that EB5 is used for. We've used it for hospitality, retail. You can use it for rental. You can use it for condo. You can use it for office. I think it's all about the project specific. I think the market overall is healthy. It's just a matter of finding the right project in the right area and with the right economics on it. It is tough to find the correct projects now, but if you buy projects correctly, the market overall is healthy. And I think in this new administration, I think there's going to be enormous economic stimulus with the with the President-elect Trump coming in with a couple of things. Obviously, his infrastructure spending, his tax repeal, and rollback of Dodd-Frank. So while Dodd-Frank, certain parts of it are kicking in, I think at the same time, parts are going to be coming back, being rolled back. And I think that's going to be, especially for New York, an enormous economic stimulus because obviously the banking industry is located in New York, and you've seen enormous growth. You've seen jobs, I think it's 100,000 jobs a year for the last 5 years, but none of that's been in the banking industry because the banks haven't been hiring. If anything, they've been letting go. But now if Dodd-Frank gets reduced or rolled back, I think you'll start to see job hiring in the banks, and that will be an enormous economic stimulus to the country, and specifically New York being the financial capital of the world.
One point that we should make is that, these investments, like if you were to invest today in a project, right? These investments are 5 to 7 years. So you'll go through maybe a couple of ups and downs in the real estate market. So as long as you pick a city, that traditionally has always had growth, which is, New York and other major cities, you're in a good position. So long as you follow the principles of good developer, senior construction financing in place, and you follow those principles, you really won't get hurt either way. You won't get hurt in the project, you won't get hurt in your investment, and you'll get your green card approved because it's a journey. It's a 5 to 7 year journey to get through the process, as Connor knows.
Connor, is there a sense that they know that this is a long game, right? They're not anxious. I think getting the money back comes after. The most important thing is to get the green card, get the immigration process, right? Is there a sense of anxiety about getting their money back quickly? Is there a sense of nervousness about getting your money back quickly with the people you've dealt with?
Do you mean if the people really understand how it will be quickly get the money back? I think generally, currently in China market, nearly most of the potential EB5 investors, they already know that it will be take longer and longer for them to get money back. So currently they are serious on choosing serious concern about choosing the right project to go. Yeah, I think one good thing is if you make investment in real estate market, personally I prefer EB5 project for real estate project. I think one good thing is if the economic is okay in US, so if it's sound or solid developers, so you don't have to worry too much. They do some frauding things to cheating your money or something. Yeah.
Can you give us a sense of the scale of the program? How much money is coming in from China every year into the U.S. into real estate projects, Nick?
You mean overall?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the country, the quota for EB5 visa category is 10,000. We file annually somewhere around 16,000 petitions a year. That represents, $7.5 billion in development, and by and large into real estate and by and large into major cities. I'd say New York City probably gets the benefit of at least 35% of that, and probably 35% into the west coast of California, and then the rest is spread out throughout the country. But the potential can be a lot greater if we can get the visa category, expanded upon so that the waiting list is much shorter. Because as the waiting list gets longer and longer and longer, people think twice about investing in the program. So we're working on that as a part of the new legislation. And
is there any wiggle? Is that something that's a possibility that the cap raises from 10,000 to something else?
Well, I think the possibility that they do raise that, but there's also a possibility of another visa category, which Senator Schumer introduced into Senate Bill 744. That was passed by the Senate, and that visa category is for 20,000 visas for a $1 million investment that creates 25 jobs. There's no waiting list. There's no country quotas. It's not subject to anything. And that would be great for urban cities like New York City. So as we go forward, we're lobbying Congress for more visas in the EB5 category that we have now, and we're also going to bring forth Senator Schumer's program of 20,000 visas at $1 million a pop, and I think that would be very well received because there'd be no waiting time, no waiting list for the visa.
What's the timeline on something like that to kick in?
Well, your I-526 petition would still take you 12 to 15 months to get approved, but once that got approved, you go right in line for your I-485, which is your visa, and that happens within 3 months of the time you get your 526. So effectively, within 15 months or so, you can have your visa in your hand.
And in terms of, Scott, just coming back to you on commercial properties, when you're raising money for commercial properties, is the process the same? Does it change at all in terms of raising the EB5 funds? Is it uniform?
When you say raising for commercial property versus...
So if you're doing a hotel project, for example, as opposed to a residential project, on your end, does it stay the same?
Yeah, it's the same process. It's the same process as far as going through, it's a different capital stack. It could be, but it's the same, with USIF, we do it either as mezzanine or preferred equity, but it's the same process if it's a condominium project, a retail project, a hotel project, or an office project. It doesn't, as far as from a developer standpoint, it's the same process.
Okay. I want to thank all our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.